talking about. And, for any of you, all the ones that I see on the screen, you're in recovery. But there may be someone listening to this on YouTube that the information can be beneficial. So what I'm going to be talking about is interventions. And, when I was in the strictly drug alcohol field, in 1996, Johnson & Johnson Institute came out with a formula or a program of how to do interventions. And how that came about is the CEO of Johnson & Johnson was a recovering alcoholic, and he made it very clear and very plain that he was, and he really helped a lot of people. And it was, he got some therapists together, and they developed this model of intervention.
Okay.
Hello. So, in 96, I took the training to learn how to do interventions, and have done a lot of them. I don't anymore, but I have done a lot of them. And really, it's the most loving thing that a family and friends can do for an addict of any sort, is to love them enough to be willing to intervene on the disease. You're not intervening on them. It's not about being critical to them. It's about intervening on the disease. And so how we were trained is that it was a secret form of, or it was, you kept the addict they were not involved in the preparation of the intervention. I would go in, like I've done them in New York City and Chicago and Oregon and Florida and you name it, Houston, different places, because interventions were real new then. People didn't know about them, and so I was on the cutting edge, I guess. But anyway, and what I would do is do the intervention for people, family members calling about their loved one and coming to Shades, and so they would have me to come do the intervention. And I didn't charge. I just did, would go for the expenses. I will tell you now, the field of intervention, it is a huge business today. The average cost of an intervention starts at $1,500 up to $10,000, and that's plus all the expenses. So I've never charged for very much of anything I've ever done, because my main thing was I wanted people to get help. So anyway, nevertheless, it is one of the most loving things a family or friends can do for an addict is to intervene on the disease. And so what I would do, it would be a 3-day process, or 2 or 3, usually 2.5. So I would, the more people you have involved, the better. So I would go in, I would work with the family by phone. That was way before Zoom or anything. And so I would give them homework assignments, and I would go in and work with the family one whole day and get them prepared to do the intervention, and have them to write out specific things, the behavior that they saw in the addict, and to come from love. Not, a lot of times when you're a family member of an addict, you get so angry at them, that's the last thing you want to do is come with from love. So we would work, and then either the second or the third day, depending on if the family was ready, then we would bring the client in, and they would not know what they were coming in for, and it was a surprise type of intervention. Now, it wasn't about me, but I will tell you, every one of the interventions, and I didn't do a high number, but I did a lot of them. Every one was successful. If you count, the client coming in for treatment, success, they were very successful. And then also, it's about continuum care. It's about looking at what they do after treatment. So that is what we call the Johnson model of intervention. And then, and it's more of a coerced model where you come up with consequences. This is what I have seen, this is the behavior, and this is the consequence. If you don't go to treatment, this is what I'm going to do. And so when you work with the family, or when I would, you've got to get those family members to really stand firm in what they were saying. For instance, we're going to quit funding. We're going to not pay your rent. We're going to quit giving you money if you don't go to treatment, if you don't get help. Because in that first day we would talk, and we didn't even have this term enabling. We didn't know what that, the term was. People just had it, which they were over caring for the addict. So we would do that, and then bring we would invite the person in, and it would be a surprise. And it would be kind of a hard first hour or two. I've never had one to leave. And like I said, everyone we did was successful, but I didn't do them in the hundreds. So that is that coercion model. And I think they might still do some of them. I don't know about that. But I have a friend, Dr. Judith Landau, and I can't remember the year, I had it written down here, but she developed another type of, it's the ARISE model. It's called ARISE intervention, ARISE. And so she's a PhD, she's a medical doctor, she's worked in the field of addiction for years and years and years. And so she developed this model. It kind of bothered her about the coercion, that it was more of putting the addict on the spot. So she developed this new model. And Shades sponsored a workshop that she did, and I did the first part of the training. I didn't go all the way through it, but I did the first part, and it was, I think, a 3 or 4 day, I can't remember, but anyway. So it's what we call invitational. It's the invitation type of, and you do work with the family ahead of time, in that you do, because the family is the one that contacts you. You're never contacted first by the addict alcoholic, or it is maybe a physician will contact the interventionist. But anyway, nevertheless, you do work with the family first and teach them about addiction. Because if you don't get the family on board, and we've seen it in working in treatment. I've been in this business over 40 years, and if you can get the family on board, you've got the client. If you can get the family on board to stop enabling the client to stay sick, the addict may not ever choose to recover, but the family can. And what happens in the disease of addiction, it is a family disease, and it affects everyone. And I think it's probably still so, there's probably around 27, 28 people directly affected by an addict. That includes probation officers, that includes ministers, doctors, family members. I mean, the list goes on, that's affected by the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction. And I'm going to talk about eating disorders later, but I want to talk about drugs and alcohol right now, because that is really where the intervention started was with the drugs and alcohol. So with the RISE model, you do work with the family first, and you've got to get them on board, and they must get their anger out. You can't go into an intervention with either model angry. You can't. And I'll tell you, the two most effective people to have in an intervention are children, the children of the addict, and the employer of the addict. If you can get them on board, plus the family and friends, because, if the addict's still employed, but those two in children can be the most effective in getting an addict, alcoholic to treatment when you get the children in there. And it has to be age appropriate. They have to be old enough to understand and be able to work with within that group when we're working. Like I said, I haven't done an intervention in years. I could do one this afternoon if anyone. You never learn. You never not have those skills. I just haven't done them. It's been a while. I don't know, several years, and I'd go and. Usually I'd always take someone with me, and I'd do the intervention, and then we would escort the client back ourselves. And now it's a huge business to be, it's developed into a lot of employment for people, and you don't even have to have a license to train to be an interventionist. So you can even train to be to export people to, we would bring them ourselves. We'd fly on the plane with them or drive them in the car. I did one with a man that was a very wealthy man, and his, he owned the business, but his employees had his plane ready for us. I flew in one way, they had his plane ready, he got on the plane, we flew here, he went into treatment. And so, like I'm saying, the ones that I've done, it's not about me, but the interventions are very successful. But this new model, and I say it's new, it's not real new, it has been around for since the 80s, since the, I guess late 90s, I can't remember. Anyway, when Judith Landau, Dr. Judith, develop their RISE model. And the RISE model is where it is by invitation. You do meet, like I said, with the family first, and then, kind of get them on board, because you don't want anyone in there that's not on board for the intervention. And then you invite the addict in, and sometimes you don't even, you meet with the family. And sometimes, depending on, you will go ahead and invite the addict into the first meeting. But it's really better to educate the family a little bit before. So you invite the addict in early, very early on, where there's no secret. And the purpose, the goal for the RISE model, yes, it is to help people get into treatment, and maybe not then. It is to educate the addict about the disease. And, the number one symptom of any addiction is denial. Don't even know I'm lying. When any of us, majority of any addict, they may realize that they have a problem, but they don't know how it has affected other people. And they really, there's a real arrogance about addicts, particularly when we're in the disease, and we think that it's all about us, and what we've done has not affected anyone, and it's not their business what we've done or doing. So the RISE model is to really educate not only the family, but the addict. And to introduce the idea of going to treatment. Now, sometimes they're not successful in getting the addict to go at that time, but they keep working. Where the early model, the Johnson and Johnson model, was a one-time event. You did the intervention. If they went to treatment, great. If not, the Arise model is a process. It's a process, and it's ongoing. And so if the addict decides not to go to treatment at that time, they keep having meetings and they keep inviting the addict to join them. And the percentage, really the percentage is about the same with both models, but it's about 83% for people getting into treatment. So interventions can be very successful, and there is a big, in the RISE model, there is a big point and that everyone has to get honest. It's a lot about not keeping secrets. And family members have kept lots of secrets for the addicts. They've covered up for. I remember one time, this has been years ago, I had babies, and my husband was manager before he went into business for himself, and he was manager of a oil field equipment business, and he was an alcoholic. He was what we call a running drunk. He'd be sober 3 or 4 months, and then he wouldn't come home for supper one night, and I knew I wouldn't see him for 3 or 4 days. And so I just had our third child, and then I had his 3 children. So we had a house full of children, and one weekend he didn't come home. And of course I stayed up and walked the floor and wrung my hands and all, and come Monday morning he wasn't home yet. And my fear was we wouldn't have that paycheck if he didn't show up to work. So this is the sad part of the family and how the family covers up for the addict. I remember calling my husband's, the store, he was the store manager, but I remember calling one of the owners and telling him that RL was sick, that he'd been sick all weekend, and that's why he wasn't at work on Monday morning. And this man was a big joker, and he carried me on and carried me on and asked me what was wrong with RL and all of that. And finally he said, well, Teddy, I'm standing here at the counter, and I'm looking through those plate glass windows, and I see RL in there at his desk. And I'll tell you the shame that came over me, because that's what happens to family members. We began to lie for the addict. And I couldn't go down to that store for years. I couldn't face that man. That's what the alcoholism and drug addiction does to the family. It makes liars out of us. You know, we want to defend and keep the secret, and we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed for them, and we're embarrassed for us and for our kids, and blah, blah, blah. But I'll tell you that was a point and did I stop covering up for him? No, I don't think I did it quite as much, but I continued to cover up for him. I'd cover up in front of our children. You know, well, Daddy's sick. Don't go in there. Daddy's sick. You know, and what he had was a hangover. And so, talk a little bit about how you put an intervention together. And we recommend for the family. Now, I want to talk out of 2 sides of my mouth. Sometimes family members can do what we call a soft intervention to an addict. That means if the family is really close to the addict, has been around them for a lot, and there is a loving relationship between them, the first intervention can be what we call is a soft intervention, where the family can just gather and say, and this is without a therapist, and can say out of love they're concerned about the addict. Now, that doesn't work a lot of times, and they'll deny it and they'll get angry, the addict does, and y'all are ganging up on me. And so there's no one to intervene between the family and the addict. There's no one to keep the order. And sometimes a soft intervention will work, so that a lot of times it's just about getting the elephant out and talking about the elephant in the living room. That's what a soft intervention is, because everyone covers up for the addict, the alcoholic. And so a soft intervention is about telling the truth. And, and a lot of times the family, this will be the first time that they've really told the truth about what they see and how they've been affected about their loved one's alcoholism. Sometimes that works, sometimes that just makes them mad, the addict angry, and they'll just try to hide their disease more. But anyway, that is one way, what we call a soft intervention. And then, when the family really sees that the addict is getting worse and worse and worse, then this is where that they they enlist the aid of an interventionist. And I say that, don't just get a therapist. There's a lot of good therapists out there, but if they're not trained in how to do an intervention, what they'll try to do is do therapy. It's too early to do therapy. It's not about doing therapy with the family or the addict. It's about intervening on the disease. And it takes some real techniques, and those are where you get a trained interventionist. And there's Heather Hayes is a person we've worked with for years, and she's now helping Dr. Lowndes Judith to do trainings. And Heather Hayes owns a transport business where she goes all and she trains people to transport after they do the intervention. Anyway, it's become a big business, So one of the things is if you're going to do an intervention, first off is find an interventionist. And how you can find a good interventionist is usually by calling treatment centers. But you have to be kind of careful with that. And I'm not being doom and gloom, but there are treatment centers that will enlist and will pay interventionists to do interventions for them. Now, years ago, the Attorney General of the United States put a stop to that because it became a big business where treatment centers would pay an interventionist to bring in clients. And so it got to be, it was not a pretty scene. So this was back years and years ago that the Attorney General stopped that. It had that middleman. Now, I will say, I do think that there are treatment centers back doing that. I don't know. I'm not getting into that. But anyway, select a good interventionist. And I just gave you names of two that are, well known. They're ethical. They're very good interventionists. And then, they will start helping you to form the group. And I want to say this, the more the merrier. It is, the more people you have at an intervention that really loves the addict, don't get anyone that's mad at them. Not everyone may be angry at their behavior, but get people who love and care about the addict and who really wants to help them. And so it's good to have, it doesn't have to be a large group, but it's still, the more people you have, the more loved the addict's going to feel. And then you form the group, and then you plan the intervention. There's just a process, and then you invite the, but really with the ARISE model, you invite the addict in from the very beginning. I like both models, but I'm still old school. I still like the Johnson and Johnson model. But anyway, I won't get into that. Okay, so, but you do have to have come up with some consequences that you have as a family member. You know, if it's an adult child, I want you to get help. I love and care about you, and I want you to get help. And you list the specific things that you have seen this addict do, their behavior. And then you also list the ways that it has affected you and what you're willing to do and not do. A lot of times the addict has no idea how their disease has affected the family. I didn't know how my eating disorder had affected my kids. After I went to treatment and started talking with the kid, my children, my adult grown children, what I realized that they knew that their dad was an alcoholic, that he was sick. They just thought I was fat and mean. I was such a rager. And my children, every one of them will say that my eating disorder far affected them far worse than their father's alcoholism. There's some way that children have an idea that the addict is sick. So you can do.
And I know I'm breaking protocol and interrupting, but I do have a legit question. What do you do? Because as a therapist, I'm trying to. The family, you're saying you want the family to be more upset with the disease and the addiction than the addict. But what do you do? That it's a moral issue. They're not able to get away from that. And so I don't want to go into that intervention because they don't grasp that disease concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they don't grasp the disease concept, I'm concerned that they're going to jump off into that angry at the addict because it's a moral issue. You just need to be able to stop.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at doing some interventions, what do you do with that situation where they're like, oh, we want to make an intervention, but they can't fully grasp that disease concept?
You work with the family and you educate them until they come around. And if they don't, I would not do the intervention, because you must get the family on board, and that is through education. And and I know that you deal with a lot of religious people, and I'll tell you, when it comes to addiction, they're some of the hardest to deal with because they see it more as a sin, a moral issue. And so, but I will say, Bradley is from Alexandria, Louisiana, and they have a group there that is, I wish that it was all over the world. And I'm going to have Bradley sometime do a Wednesday and talk about what they do there. It's called 7, and they're doing some remarkable things with addicts and with religious people. And so, and they are coming over to understand about addictions as a disease. So my answer to your question is keep working with the family. And if they don't change, I would not do an intervention with the family. See if there's friends. See if there's friends available, someone, because
So you're telling me, and I'm just, but I'm like, Mama, I'm not going to do an intervention with you, but I'm going to do an intervention with his friend Jimmy and John. Mama is not going to be happy when Mama ain't happy. So you would recommend trying to look at MJ's over there laughing at me. She knows what I'm talking. So you're recommending that if Mom is not receptive to the disease concept and is thinking it's more of a moral, that we find people that are open to that disease concept and do the intervention with them, because if I go and do an intervention with somebody else and exclude Mom because she's not getting it after a period of time, Mama not going to be happy.
Okay. And that invite her, and Mom and Dad, and I'll tell you, they will show up, and particularly a mother, but make it clear that she is to listen and understand. That's why that you've got to spend time with the family and get them educated. Otherwise, it's going to create more chaos than it's worth. you know. And the whole goal of doing an intervention is to get the client, the addict help, you know. And, you know, if you start with the family and work, you know, talk about codependency and about Al-Anon and get the family on board some of their own healing first. You know, education is vital to the family. And sometimes they're stubborn, they're very stubborn. If we could get every family member involved in Al-Anon, there'd be fewer and fewer active addicts running around. Because when you can get the family healthy and where they can get off of the addict's back, get out of their way, and go on with their own life, that gets the addict's attention, because they are surrounded by people who love and care about them, but they don't know how to love and care about them in a healthy way.
So has my epilepsy gotten better or worse?
So, okay, all right. I don't know if that's helped you at all, but one of the things I want to talk about is I've been in this business, like I said, over 40 years, way over 40 years, but I've had the treatment center and treated eating disorders for 35 years. And out of that 35 years, we have had interventions done. Families very lovingly get so concerned about an anorexic that is so ill that they, that they're not functioning. They'll do an intervention on an anorexic. And a bulimic, you know, when the family finally gets how sick the bulimic is, they will do their own intervention or they will call for help. Of 35 years that I have been here, I've only had 2 compulsive overeaters of morbid obese, only 2 families that have intervened on them. And it saddens me because family members, you know, they have a lot of concern about anorexics, the disease of anorexia, and then bulimia. Oh, they're gonna die, they're gonna do this. And a lot of times, and I'm not saying this for all families, but I'm saying I've only had 2 interventions done on the morbidly obese, because a lot of times family members look down their noses at the morbidly obese. Not all families do, but they, you know, will say things, well, just stop eating, push yourself back from the table. But on a certain level, family members know how ill an anorexic is and how ill bulimic is. I used to appear on the Dr. Oz show, I think 5, 6 times, I don't know, many times. And we've got someone here that came from the Dr. Oz show. To my memory, we never had an obese person. It was anorexics. I know Geraldo, years ago, when Geraldo was very popular, he said one of the very first anorexics we ever treated, he sent her here because an anorexic, the disease is so visible and it is so scary that the person's gonna die. Guess what? It is that true on the other side with the morbidly obese, and it saddens me. And now there's so much talk, and there's a part of me that's all for it, but there's so much talk about body positivity, that it's, you know, really okay to love your body where it is. And I know all of that. And I am for loving yourself where you are, because that will help you to begin to change. But I think, it hurts my heart when I see 300 or 400 pound people talking about how that body positivity and they want the world to accept them where they are. I hear that. But what my concern is, because I've weighed almost 300 pounds, it absolutely does something to your life. It does something to your physical life. It keeps you from being active. It keeps you from doing the things that you want to do in life. You can love yourself at 400 pounds all you want to, but still it's the disease that we look at. And so I'm getting on a soapbox. I need to get past this. But, you know, I do believe in, like I said, loving ourselves where we are. I hated my own guts at that stage. But I had a wonderful sponsor that had me start rubbing lotion on my body, and I could hardly touch my body because I hated my body so much, you know, and I could only look from the neck up. But she was wonderful with me, and she had was 100-pounder. She had lost over 100 pounds, so she knew where I was. And so she did start me doing affirmations. This is way before we ever heard of Louise Hayes or affirmations. You know, God just sends people our way when we need them. And she started at me, you know, doing affirmations about my body and, you know, rubbing lotion on my body to start, you know, to stop the self-hatred. And that got me to the starting gate. But she also taught me about it being a disease and how I wasn't guilty for having it, but I was very responsible for treating it. So I'm really big on family members, encouraging family members to do interventions on the morbidly obese as well as anorexics and compulsive and the bulimics, because they all need help. We all need help. So with that, I'm going to open it up, and I will tell you, interventions can be highly effective. They can absolutely be effective. You do not have to sit back and watch an addict die. You can intervene on the disease. Okay, so any questions, comments? Bradley, you have anything else? Any of the rest of you?